Hi everybody, this is A.R.S.E, the Random Center Explains, and today we're going to do a take two on who or what the snake in the Garden of Eden represented. So, the Torah, what the Old Testament is based on, wasn't written until around 300 BC. The Sumerian culture, where some of the original stories in the Old Testament or Torah come from, existed about 3,000 years before that. And from them we get the first written story, or the oldest known written story, which is the Epic of Gilgamesh, in which you get the first flood story that was written down. Putnapishtim was the character that survived the flood in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Torah and Old Testament, he's called Noah. So in the epic, he, surviving the flood, blessed him with immortality, which was one of the aspects that was changed later on when it was written down in the Torah. Because Noah was just a regular person, and he ended up passing, and his children repopulate the earth. Okay, so that's the Torah, dated to around 300 BC, or the beginning of which. And in the Sumerian culture, they in themselves, the flood referenced in the Epic of Gilgamesh is thought to be the Black Sea inundation, which was about 2,000 years before the height of the Sumerian culture, in about 5600 BC. So that's where that story is thought to have come from. That flood story was based on the Black Sea inundation. The Sumerian culture also had a story about a fish man walking out of the water. That story, I think, dates back to the Younger Dryas, where, like I said before, there was a solar event. It caused a weeks, maybe a months-long lightning storm that melted the glaciers in North America, causing sea levels to rise about 400 feet. That rising in sea level forced the coastal populations of the world that probably are already seafaring, which I'll cover in another video, about a Sirius dog star and its probability in it being evidence of a seafaring ancient civilization. Anyway, so the Younger Dryas happens, forcing the remaining northern populations that survived the Upper Dryas event to leave the coastal cities that they, in the intervening 1200 years, they, reestablished some type of civilization, probably. Anyway, so the story about the fish man walking out of the water and bringing knowledge to the Sumerians, or to West Asia, in a way, I think, like I said, dates back to the Younger Dryas, which is also referenced or known as the Neolithic era. Interestingly enough, that's when farming began in that area. So maybe, what I'm saying, there was somebody that came that, like I said, the snake in the Garden of Eden and the fishman story, I think, are a reference to the same thing, about people coming with the snake cult or snake worshipping cult, and bringing their knowledge from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere, or to, in that area anyways, the central regions of Asia, or western central regions. Because there's stories too all over the South Americans about people bringing knowledge. In Asia, there's stories about, all dating back about 11,000 years of, there being knowledge bringers. Okay, so the snake. If anybody studies the agnostic aspect of Christianity, meaning that, like they're parsing it word for word and looking for literal, or translations, I guess, or references, is that the snake is never referenced in the Old Testament or in the book of Genesis, whatever, as being evil. He was just a knowledge bringer. Um, so Adam and Eve being the only two people on Earth, that's something I think is what's term long memory of humanity, meaning that there's stories that were told, generation to generation. So about 74,000 years ago, there was what was known as a supervolcano eruption in Southeast Asia, which depopulated the Earth to the point where humanity had a chance of actually disappearing. So some of the estimates I've read go from anywhere from 15,000 to 100,000 humans as we know them, Homo sapiens, left on the planet. The most probable number was probably like around 50,000, and that's where all 8 billion of us currently come from, is from those 50,000 people that survived this volcanic eruption 74,000 years ago. So I think that Adam and Eve aspect of the story is just a long memory of when the Earth was really had a sparse population, and then you have the snake bringing knowledge. I think that's why the fruit is referenced, or the fruit tree, is that, they're bringing knowledge of agriculture from the northern hemisphere to the southern hemisphere. Yeah, and then like I said, the other flood reference in the Bible, I think that's why it comes along a lot later, is the Black Sea inundation. And I covered that. I'll cover that in another video. So the reason why I think maybe it was North Americans that were the ones that spread knowledge all over the world after the Younger and Upper Dryas events is because the Aztecs tell a story where they walked from Aztlan, and if you compare Aztlan and Atlantis, they're really similar in spelling. So if the Aztecs walked from more than likely the northern hemisphere or North America to the southern parts of North America, ending up in Mexico City, they that means that more than likely Atlantis was located in the Americas, or there was some type of society that was, I guess, advanced. I don't want to, like, when people talk about ancient societies being advanced, all these people start, oh, well, did they have this? Or no, I mean, what, by advanced, what I mean is that they probably had a religion, specialist, in society that had the roles, stuff like that. Like, okay, so buffalo. I think buffalo were the original cattle of whoever lived in North America before the Upper Dryas event, whether sometimes referenced as the Clovis people. And the reason why I think this is because if you look at how we have cows now, like, how long do you think it would take for cows to relearn how to live in the wild after these, hundreds, thousands of years of being held as a pet, I guess, or, cattle. And I think that's why buffalo are so docile too, is that they were at one point the cattle. Anyway, though, so getting back to the snake in the Garden of Eden, I just think it's just a story told by that area of the world about the people that brought knowledge to them, about agriculture. And because, like I said, later on you have the other flood story, and then you have in the Sumerian dialect, like I've referenced this before, there's two distinct types of words. There's what are considered the older words that reference, like basic things, and then there's what they consider technological words, which will reference like specialists, like bakers, brewers, fishermen, navigators, and the like. So yeah. So why do I think the North Americans were probably more advanced than people give them credit for? I mean, I'll get into this in another video, but there's evidence of people being in North America a lot longer than what's thought right now. And I think they were pretty decent, at least coastal navigators, because they knew that North America was shaped like a turtle. That's why it's called Turtle Island. And then, like I said, with the Aztecs, they walked from Aztlan. I'll cover that in another video because it's pretty interesting. And then, yeah, oh, and then Adam's Rock. Ignore that, that's for my cookies. Kids are about to get out of school. Uh, so Adam's Rock in southern parts of Africa is a collection of stones that are shaped in a circle that are thought to be an astrological marker dating to around 74,000, 75,000 years ago, which could be a reference to the supervolcano I mentioned earlier that depopulated the Earth. Kind of like how the Göbekli Tepe is a marker of Upper and Younger Dryas, or the Younger Dryas anyways. And then there's a snake in Göbekli Tepe with a human head. And like I said before, North and South America, snake culture, or that there was a very widespread worship of snakes and a very strong snake cult in all those societies, it seemed like, in the Americas. So yeah, so like I said, the snake was just a wisdom bringer. He wasn't evil, unless you consider, knowledge evil. But yeah, so there's that. Like I said, this Take Two series just to, cause I go off on tangents like I did earlier in this video, and I try not to, but I just wanted to clean up some of my talking points that I felt were unclear in the first one. So yeah, so namaste, like, share, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.